Hello everyone. This video is for the chapter 4. I'm gonna share my screen. Share. Here we go. Okay, chapter 4. I'm gonna read it. Marta. When she opened her eyes in the morning, it was because a young housemaid had come into her room to light the fire and was kneeling on the hearthrug, raking out cinder noisily. Mary lay and watched her for a few moments and then began to look about the room. She had never seen a room at all like it and thought it curious and gloomy. The walls were covered with tapestry with a forest scene embroidered on it. There were fantastically dressed people under the trees, and in the distance there was a glimpse of the turrets of the castle. There were hunters and horses and dogs and ladies. Mary felt as if she were in the forest with them. Out of a deep window she could see a great climbing stretch of land which seemed to have no trees on it, and to look rather like an endless, dull, purplish sea. "What is that?" she said, pointing out of the window. Martha, the young housemaid, who had just risen to her feet, looked and pointed also. "That there?" he said. "Yes, that's the Moor," with a good-natured grin. "Does the like it that like it?" "No," answered Mary, "I hate it." "That's because they're not used to it," Martha said, going back to her part. "The thing's it's too big and bare now, but they will like it." "Do you?" inquired Mary. "Aye, that I do," answered Martha, cheerfully polishing away at the grate. "I just love it. It's none bare. It's covered with growing things as smells sweet. It's pure lovely in spring and summer when the gorse and broom and heather in flower. It smells of honey. There's such a lot of fresh air, and the sky looks so high, and bees and skylarks makes such a nice noise humming and sighing. I wouldn't live away from the moor for anything." Mary listened to her with a grave, puzzled expression. The native servants she had been used to in India were not in the least like this. They were obsequious and servile, and did not presume to talk to their masters as if they were their equals. They made salams and called them "protector of the poor" and names of the sort. Indian servants were commanded to do things, not ask. It was not the custom to say please and thank you, and Mary had always slapped her ayah in her face when she was angry. She wondered a little what this girl would do if one slapped her in the face. She was a round, rosy, good-natured looking creature, but she had a sturdy way which made Mistress Mary wonder if she might not even slap back, if the person who slapped her was only a little girl. "You are a strange servant," she said from her pillows rather haughtily. Martha sat up on her heels, with her blacking brush in her hand, and laughed, without seeming the least out of temper. "I know that," she said. "If there was a grand missus at Misselthwaite, I should never have been even one of the under housemaids. I might have been let to be scullery maid, but I'd never have been let upstairs. I'm too common, and I talk too much Yorkshire. But this is a funny house, for all it's so grand. Seems like there's Neither master nor mistress, except Mr. Pitcher and Miss Matlock, Mr. Craven. He won't be trouble about anything when he's here, and he is nearly always away. Miss Matlock gave me the place out of kindness. She told me she could never have done it if Misselthwaite had been like other big house. Are you going to be my servant? Mary asked, still in her impressed little Indian way. Mara began to rub her braid again. I'm Mrs. Matlock's servant, she said stoutly, and she's Mr. Craven, but I'm not to do housemaid work up here and wait on you a bit, but you won't need much waiting on. Who is going to dress me? Demanded Mary. Martha sat up on her heels again and stared. She spoke in broad Yorkshire in her amazement. Canada dresses in? It's kind of weird, right? Okay, let's try this one. Oh, what do you mean? I don't understand your language, said Mary. Ah, I forgot, Martha said. Miss Matlock told me I'd have to be careful or you wouldn't know what I was saying. I mean, can you put on your own clothes? No, answered Mary, quite indignantly. I never did in my life. My Aya dressed me, of course. Well, said Martha, evidently not in the least aware that she was impudent. It's time they should learn. They cannot begin younger. It will do thee good to wait on the scene a bit. My mother always said she couldn't see why grand people's children didn't turn out fair fools. What with nurse and being washed and dressed and took out to walk as if they was puppies. It is different in India, said Mistress Mary disdainfully. She could scarcely stand this, but Martha was not all crushed. I can see it's different, she answered almost sympathetically. I dare say it's because there's such a lot of blacks there instead of respectable white people. When I heard you was coming from India, I thought you was a black too. Mary sat up in the bed furious. What? She said. What? You thought I was a native? You daughter of a pig. Oh, Martha stared and looked hard. "Who are you calling names?" she said. "You needn't be so facetious. That's not the way for a young lady to talk. I've nothing against the blacks. When you read about them in tracts, they're always very religious. You always read as blacks, a man, and a brother. I've never seen a black, and I was fair pleased to think I was going to see one close. When I come in to light your fire this morning, I crept up to your bed and pulled the cover back carefully to look at you, and there you was, disappointedly, no more black than me, for all you're so yeller. Mary did not even try to control her rage and humiliation. You thought I was a native. You dared. You don't know anything about natives. They are not people. They're servants who must salam to you. You know nothing about India. You know nothing about anything. She was in such a rage and felt so helpless before the girl's simple stare, and somehow she suddenly felt so horribly lonely and far away from everything she understood, which understood her, that she threw herself face downward on the pillows and burst into passionate sobbing. She sobbed so unrestrainedly that good-natured Yorkshire Martha was a little frightened and quite sorry for her. She went to the bed and bent over her. You mustn't cry like that there, she begged. You mustn't for sure. I didn't know you'd be vexed. I don't know anything about anything, just like you said. I beg your pardon, miss. Do stop crying. There was something comforting and really friendly in her clear Yorkshire speech and sturdy way, which had a good effect on Mary. She gradually She gradually ceased crying and became quiet. Martha looked relieved. It's time for thee to get up now, she said. Miss Matlock said I was to carry the breakfast and tea and dinner into the room next to this. It's been made into a nursery for thee. I'll help thee on with the clothes. If that all get out of bed. If the buttons are at the back, the can button that up the self. It's so difficult. Okay. When Mary at last decided to get up, the clothes Martha took from the wardrobe were not the ones she had worn when she arrived the night before with Miss Matlock. Those are not mine, she said. Mine are black. She looked the thick white wool coat and dress over, and added with cool approval, those are nicer than mine. These are the ones the must put on, Martha answered. Mrs. Craven ordered Mr. Craven ordered Miss Matlock to get 'em in London. He said, I won't have a child dressed in black wandering about like a lost soul. He said, it would make the place sadder than it is. Put color on her. Mother, she said she knew what he meant. Mother always knows what a body means. She doesn't pull with back herself. I had black things, said Mary. The dressing process was one without them but something. Martha had buttoned up her little sister and brothers, but she had never seen a child who stood still and waited for another person to do things for her as if she had neither hands nor feet of her own. Why doesn't the put on the aunt shoes? She said when Mary quietly held out her foot. My ayah did it, answered Mary, staring. It was the custom, she said that very often. It was the custom. The native servants were always saying it. If one told them to do a thing their ancestors had not done for 1,000 years, they gazed at one mildly and said, it is not the custom. And one knew that was the end of the matter. I had not been the custom that Mistress Mary should do anything but stand and allow herself to be dressed like a doll. But before she was ready for breakfast, she began to suspect that her life at Misselthwaite Manor would end by teaching her a number of things quite new to her. Things such as putting on her own shoes, stockings, and picking up things she let fall. If Martha had been a well-trained, fine young lady's maid, she would have been more subservient and respectful, and would have known that it was her business to brush hair and button boots and pick things up and lay them away. She was, however, only an untrained Yorkshire rustic who had been brought up in a moorland cottage with a swarm of little brothers and sisters who had never dreamed of doing anything but waiting on themselves and on the younger one who were either babies in arms or just learning to totter about the and tumble over things. If Mary Lennox had been child who was ready to be assumed Amused, she would perhaps have laughed at Martha's readiness to talk, but Mary only listened to her coldly and wondered at her freedom of manner. At first she was not all interest, but gradually, as the girl rattled in her good-tempered, homely way, Mary began to notice what she was saying. You shouldn't see at all, she said. There's 12 of us, and my father only gets 16 shillings a week. I can tell you my mother's worked to it to get porridge for them all. They tumble about on the moor and playing there all day, and mother says the air of the moor fattens them. She says she'll leave they eat the grass some as the wild ponies do. Our deacon, he's 12 years old, and he's got a young pony he calls his own. Where did he get it? asked Mary. He found it on the moor with its mother when it was a little one and began to make friends with it and give it bits of bread and pluck young grass for it. And it got to like him, so it follows him about and it lets him get on and back. Dickens kind let an animal likes him. Mary had never posed an animal pet of her own and had always thought she should like one. So she began to feel a slight interest in Dickon, and as she had never before been interested in any one but herself, it was the drowning of the healthy sentiment when when she went into the room, which had been made into a nursery for her, she found that it was rather like the one she had slept in. It was not a child's room, but a grown-up person's room, with gloomy old pictures on the walls and heavy old oak chairs. A table in the center was set with a good substantial breakfast, but she had always had a very small appetite and she looked with something more than indifference at the first plate Martha set before her. I don't want it, she said. That doesn't want the porridge, Martha exclaimed incredulously. No, that doesn't know how good it is. Put a bit crack trickle on it or a bit of sugar. I don't want it, repeated Martha. Said Martha, I can't abet to see good victuals go to waste. If our children was at this table, they'd clean it bare in 5 minutes. Why? Said Mary coldly. Why? Echoed Martha. Because they scarce ever had their stomach full in their lives. They're hungry as young hogs and foxes. I don't know what it is to be hungry, said Mary with a different ignorance. Myrtle looked indignant. Well, it would do thee good to try it. I can see that plain enough, she said unspokenly. I've too patient with both, as it sits and just stares at good bread and meat. My world, don't I wish Deacon and Phil and Jen and the rest of them had what's here under their pinafores. Why don't you take it to them? Suggested Martha. It's not mine, answered Martha stoutly. And this isn't my day out. I get my day out once a month, as the rest. Then I go home and clean up for mother and give her a day's rest. Mary drank some tea and ate a little toast and some marmalade. You were pop warm and run out and play you, said Martha. It will do you good and give you some to make for your meat. Mary went to the window. There were gardens and paths and the big trees, but everything looked dull and wintry. Out? Why should I go out on a day like this? On a day like this? Well, if that doesn't go out, that have to stay in. And what has got to go to? gut, and what has the gut to do? Mary glanced about her. There was nothing to do. When Nurse Matlock had prepared the nursery, she had not thought of amusement. Perhaps it would be better to go and see what the gardens were like. Who will go with me? She inquired. Martha stared. You'll go by yourself, she answered. You'll have to learn to play like other children does when they haven't got sisters and brothers. Our Dickens goes off on the moor by himself and plays for hours. That's how he met friends with the pony. He's got sheep on the moor that knows him, and Bert as comes and eats out of his hand. However little there is to eat, he always saves a bit of his bread to coax his pets. It was really this mention of Dickon which made Mary decide to go out, though she was not aware of it. There would be birds outside, though there would not be ponies or sheep. They would be different from the birds in India, and it might amuse her to look at them. Martha found her coat and hat for her and Pierce toed little boots, and she sewed her way downstairs. If the girls run that way, they'll come the garden, she said, pointing to a gate in the wall's shrubbery. There's lots of flower in summertime, but there's nothing blooming now. She seemed to hesitate a second before she added, one of the gardens is looked up. No one's have been in it for 10 years. Why? Asked Mary in spite of herself. Her was not locked door dead to the hunter in the strange house. The Craven had it shut when his wife died so sudden. He won't let no one go inside. It was her garden. She locked the door and dug a hole and buried the key. There's Mr. Matlock bell ringing. I must run. After he was gone, Mary turned down the wall which led to the door in the shrubbery. She could not help thinking about the garden which no one had been into for 10 years. She wondered what it looked like and whether there were any flowers still alive in it. When she had passed through the shrubbery gate, she found herself in great gardens, with wide lawns and winding walls with limbs bordered. There were trees, flower beds, evergreens clipped into strange sharp, and a large pool with an old grey fountain in its midst. But the flower beds were bare and wintry, and the fountain was not playing. This was not garden which was shut up. How could a garden be shut up? You could always walk into a garden. She was just this when she saw that. At the end of the path she was following, there seemed to be a long wall with growing over it. She was not familiar enough with England to know that she was coming upon the kitchen gardens where vegetable fruit were growing. She went toward the wall and found that there was a green door in the eaving, and that it stood open. This was not a closed garden, evidently, and she could go into it. She went through the door and found that it was a garden with walls all around, and in that it was only one of several walled gardens which seemed to open into one another. She was near up a green door, revealing bushes and pathway between beds containing winter vegetables. Fruit trees were trained flat against the wall, and over some of the beds there were glass frames. The place was bare and ugly enough, Mary thought as she stood and stared about her. It might be nicer in summer when things were green, but there was nothing pretty about it now. Presently an old man with a spade over his shoulder walked through the door leading from the second garden. He looked scared when he saw Mary, and then touched his cap. He had a surly old face, and did not seem at all pleased to see her. But then she was displeased with his garden and wore her quite contrary expression, and certainly did not seem at all pleased to see him. What is this place? She asked. One at the kitchen garden, he answered. What is that? said Mary, pointing through the other grand door. Another of them, shortly. There's another on other side of the wall, and there's car other side of that. Can I go in? Asked Mary. If the lights, but there's not to see. Mary made a response. She went down the path and through the second green door. There she found more walls and winter vegetables and glass frames. But in the second wall, there was another green door. It was not open. Perhaps it led into the garden which no one had seen for 10 years. As she was not all at all a timid child and always did what she wanted to do, Mary went to the garden door and turned the handle. She hoped that door would not open because she wanted to be sure she had found the mysterious garden, but it did open quite easily, and she walked through it and found herself in an orchard. There were walls around it, also trees trained against them, and there were bare fruit trees growing in the winter brown grass, but there was no green door to be seen anywhere. Mary looked for it, and yet when she had entered the upper end of the garden, she had noticed that the wall did not seem to end with the orchard, but to extend beyond it as it enclosed a place at the other side. She could see the top of tree above the wall, and when she stood still, he saw a bird with a bright red breast sitting on the topmost branch of one of them, and suddenly he burst into his winter song, along if he had caught sight of her and was calling to her. She stopped and listened to him, and somehow his cheerful, friendly little whistle gave her a pleased feeling. Even a disagreeable little girl may be lonely, and the big closed mouse and a big bear moor and big bear gardens had met this one feels as if there was no one left in the world but herself. If she had been an affectionate child who had been used to being loved, she would have broken her head, but even though she was Mistress Mary quite contrary, she was desolate, and the bright little brought a look into her little face, which was almost a smile. She listened to him until he flew away. He was not like an India bird, and she liked him, and wondered if she should ever see him again. Perhaps he lived in the mysterious garden and knew all about it. Okay. Saya. Perhaps it was because she had nothing whatever to do that she thought so much of the desert garden. She was curious about it and wanted to see what it was like. Why had Mrs. Archibald Craven buried the key? If he had liked his wife so much, why did he hate her garden? She wondered if she should ever see him, but she knew that if she did, she should not like him, and he would not like her, and that she should only stand and stare at him and say nothing, though she should be wanting dreadfully to ask him why he had done such a queer thing. People never like me, and I never like people, she thought, and I never can tell as the Crawford children could. They were always talking and laughing and making noises. She thought of the robin and of the way he seemed to sing his song at her, and as she remembered the treetop he perched on, she stopped rather suddenly on the path. I believe that trees was in a secret garden. I feel sure it was, she said. There was a wall round the place and there was no door. She walked back into the first kitchen garden she had entered and found the old man digging there. She went and stood and stood beside him and watched him a few moments in her cold little way. He took no notice of her, and so at last he spoke to him. I have been into the other garden, she said. There was nothing to prevent thee, he answered crustily. I went into the orchard. There was no dog, a door a bit straight, he answered. There was no door there into the other garden, said Mary. What garden? He said in a rough voice, stopping his digging for a moment. The one on the other side of the wall, answered Mistress Mary. There are trees there. I saw the tops of them. A bird with a redbreast was sitting on one of them and he sang. To her surprise, the surely old withering beaten face actually changed its expression. A slow smile spread over it, and the garden looked quite different. I made her think that it was curious how much nicer a person looked when he smiled. She had not thought of it before. He turned about to the orchard side of his garden and began to whistle low soft whistle. She could not understand how such a surly man could make such a coaxing sound. Almost the next moment a wonderful thing happened. She heard a soft little rushing flight through the air, and it was the bird with the redbreast flying to them, and he actually liked one the big cloud of earth quiet near to the garden's foot. Here he is, shouted the old man. And then he spoke to the bird as if he were speaking to a child. Where has the been? The cheeky little beggar, he said. I've not seen the before today. Has the begun the courting this early in the season? That's too for us. The bird put his tiny head on one side and looked up at him with his soft bright eye, which was like a black ground dove. He seemed familiar and not the least afraid. He hoped about the he picked an herb frisky looking for seed and insect. It actually gave Mary a queer feeling in her heart because he was so pretty and cheerful and seemed so like a person. He had a tiny plump body and a delicate break and slender, delicate legs. Yeah, it's not the end yet. Okay, will he always come when you call him? She asked almost in a whisper. I, that he will. I've known him ever since he was fledgling. He come out and the nest in the other garden when he first flew over the wall. He was too weak to fly back for a few days, and when got friendly, when he went over the wall again, and the rest of the broad was gone, and he was lonely, and he come back to me. What kind of bird is he? Mary asked. Doesn't the know? He's a robin redbreast, and the friendliest, curiosest bird alive. They're almost as friendly as dogs. If you know how to get on it with him, watch him pecking about there and looking round at us now and again. He knows we're talking about him. It was the queerest thing in the world to see the old fellow. He looked at the plump little scarlet with coated bird as if he were both proud and fond of him as a conceit one. He chuckled. He likes to hear folk talk about him, and curious blasphemy. There never was his like for curiosity and meddling. He's always coming to see what I'm planting. He knows all the things Master Craven never troubles his to find out. He is the head gardener, he is. The robin hop about busily pecking the soil, and now then stop and look at them a little. Mary thought his black brown gaze and her great curiosity. It really seemed as if we are whining all about her, the curveling in her hair in praise. Where did the rest of the bird fly to? She asked. There's no knowing. The old one turns them out and these nest and make them fly and they're scratch you before you know it. This one was a knowing one, and he knew he was lonely. Mistress Mary went a step nearer to the Robin and looked at him very hard. "I'm lonely," she said. She had not known before that this was one of the things which made her feel sore and cross. She seemed to find it when the robin looked at her and she looked at the robin, and old Gardner pushed his cap back on his bald head and stared at the minute. "Are the little wench from India?" he asked. Mary nodded. "Then no wonder that be lonelier before that's done," he said. He began to dig again, driving his face deep into his black garden soil while the robin hopped about very busily employed. "What is your name?" Mary inquired, stood up and asked her. "Ben Weddellstop," he answered, and then added with a crackle. "I'm lonely myself, except when he's with me," and he jarred his thumb toward the robin, "his only friend I've got. I've no friends at all," said Mary. I never had. My eye didn't like me, and I never played with anyone. It's Yorkshire habit to say what you think with blunt frankness." And old Ben Witherstaff was a Yorkshire moorman. "Then me are a good bit like," he said. "We was wolf out of some clothes. We're neither of us good looking, and we're both of us as sore as we look. We've got no same nasty tempers, both of us, I will warrant." How much is this? This was plainly speaking. Marilyn never heard the story about herself and herself. Never serpent with Salaimed and submit to you wherever you did, she said. Never thought much about her looks, but she wondered if she was an actress, if as being weatherless, and she also wondered if she looked as sore as he had looked before the robin came. She actually began to wonder if also if she nasty temper, she felt uncomfortably. Suddenly a clear, rippling little sound broke out near her, and she turned around, and she was standing a few feet from a young apple tree, and Robin had flown onto one of its branches and had burst into a trap of sun. When Witherstaff laughed outright. "What did he do for that?" asked Mary. "He made up his mind to make friends with thee," replied Ben. "Dang me if he hasn't took a fancy to me," said Mary, and she moved toward and the little tree softly looked up. "Would you make friends with me?" she said. "Robin, just as if she is speaking to a person. Would you?" And she did not say it either. She heard little voice or her prettiest Indian voice, but in a tone so soft, eager, coaxing that Ben was surprised she been was when she heard him whistle. "Why," she cried out, "the said that as nice a human as if there was a real child instead of a sharp old woman that said it almost like Deacon talks to his wild things on the moor." "Did not Deacon?" Mary asked, turning around her in a hurry. "Everybody knows him, wonder about everything. Blackberries knows him. I warrant the faucet shows him where their cups lies, and Skylar's doesn't hide their nest from him." Mary would have liked to ask some more questions. She was almost as curious about Dickens as she was about the desert garden. But just the moment the robin, who had ended his song, gave a little shake of his wings, spread them, and flew away, and he met his visit and had other things to do. "He has flown over the wall," Mary cried out, watching him. "He has flown into the orchard. He has flown across the other wall and the garden where there is no door. He lives there," said Alban. "He came out of the egg there, and his country they're making up. Some young madam of the robin lives among them. Roses trees there." "Rose trees?" said Mary. "Are there rose trees?" Ben Witherell took up his spade again and began to dig. One was 10 years ago. He humbled. I should like to see them, said Mark. Where is the garden door? There must be a door somewhere. Winthrop spat deep and looked and uncompassionately, and he had looked when she first saw him. There was 10 years ago, but there isn't now, he said. No door, cried Mary. There must be. None as anyone can find, as none as anyone business. That you be a nettlesome wench and put your nose where it's not supposed to go. Here I must go on with my work. Get you gone and play you. I've no more time. And he actually stopped digging, threw his pad over his shoulder, and walked off without even glancing at her or saying goodbye. Okay, that's the end of chapter 4. I'm sorry, chapter 4. The next one is chapter 5, of course, but I will continue in the next video, so thank you.